ne compte plus les crises.
upheaval abounds.
En Afghanistan, l'économie est en
In
ruine,
Afghanistan,
plus de la
the
moitié de la
economy is in
population est en proie à
ruins.
des niveaux de
Over
faim
half of all
extrêmes,
Afghans
tandis que
face
les droits
extreme
humains, et en
levels of
particulier
hunger,
les droits des
while
femmes
human
et des
rights,
filles,
particularly
sont
the rights of
bafoués.
women and girls, are being
En
trampled.
République démocratique du Congo, les groupes
In the
armés de
Democratic
l'Est
Republic of the
terrorisent les
Congo,
civils
armed
et
groups
attissent
in
les
the
tensions
east are
régionales.
terrorizing civilians
Dans
and
la Corne de
inflaming
l'Afrique, une
regional
sécheresse sans
tensions.
précédent
In the Horn
menace
of
la vie et
Africa,
les moyens de
an
subsistance de 22 millions de
unprecedented drought
personnes.
is threatening the lives
En
and
Éthiopie,
livelihoods of
les
22
combats ont
million
repris,
people.
soulignant
In
l'urgence
Ethiopia,
pour les partis
fighting
de cesser
has
les
resumed,
hostilités et de
underscoring the need for
revenir
the
à la
parties
table
to
des
immediately
négociations
cease
sous l'égide de
hostilities
l'Union
and
africaine.
return to the peace table.
Haïti, les
In
gangs
Haiti,
détruisent les
gangs
fondements
are
même de la
destroying the very
société.
building blocks
En
of
Libye, les divisions
society.
continuent de mettre le
In
pays en
Libya,
péril.
divisions
En
continue
Irak,
to
les tensions
jeopardize the
actuelles
country.
compromettent la
In Iraq,
stabilité.
divisions,
Et en Israël et en Palestine,
or
les
rather,
cycles de
ongoing
violence sous
tensions threaten
l'occupation se
stability.
poursuivent
In Israel
et les
and Palestine,
perspectives de paix
cycles of
fondées sur
violence
une solution
under
à
the
deux États
occupation
ne
continue
cessent de
as
s'éloigner.
prospects for peace based on a
Au
two-state
Myanmar,
solution
les
grow
effroyables
ever
situations
more distant.
humanitaires et des
In
droits
Myanmar,
humains,
the
ainsi que
appalling
les conditions de
humanitarian, human
sécurité
rights, and
s'aggravent de
security
jour en
situation
jour.
is
Au
deteriorating by
Sahel,
the day.
l'insécurité
In
et
the
les
Sahel,
activités terroristes
alarming
atteignent des
levels
niveaux
of
alarmants,
insecurity and terrorist
tandis que les
activity
besoins
amidst
humanitaires
rising
ne cessent de
humanitarian
croître.
needs continue to grow.
En Syrie,
In
la
Syria,
violence et les
violence
difficultés
and
règnent
hardship
toujours
still
et la
prevail.
liste est encore
The
longue.
list goes
Pendant
on.
ce temps, les
Meanwhile,
menaces de recours
nuclear
aux armes
saber
nucléaires
rattling
et les risques
and
pesant
threats
sur
to
la
the
sécurité
safety
des
of nuclear
centrales
plants
nucléaires
are
ne
adding
font
to
qu'ajouter
global
à l'instabilité
instability.
planétaire. Les parties à la conférence
The review
d'examen du traité
conference
sur
of
la
the Nuclear
non-prolifération des armes
Non-Proliferation
nucléaires
Treaty
n'ont pas
failed
réussi
to
à
reach
trouver de
consensus,
consensus
and a
et
nuclear
l'accord sur
deal
le nucléaire
with
avec
Iran
l'Iran
remains
semble
elusive.
encore lointain. Il y a toutefois quelques
But
lueurs
there
d'espoir.
are some glimmers
Au
of hope.
Yémen, la trêve nationale est
In Yemen,
fragile, mais
the
elle tient
nationwide
toujours.
truce
En
is
Colombie,
fragile but
le
holding.
processus de paix
In
prend
Colombia, the
racine.
peace
Et
process
partout,
is
nous avons
taking
besoin
root.
d'une action bien plus concertée,
We need
ancrée dans
much
le
more
respect
concerted
du droit
action everywhere,
international
anchored in
et
respect
la
for
protection
international
des
law
droits
and the
humains.
protection of human rights.
Dans un monde
In
qui
a
se
splintering
déchire,
world,
nous
we
devons
need
créer
to
des
create
mécanismes de
mechanisms
dialogue
of
et de
dialogue
médiation pour
and
apaiser les
mediation
divisions.
to heal divides.
Et c'est pourquoi j'ai esquissé
This
les
is
éléments d'un
why
nouvel
I
agenda pour la
outlined
paix
elements of a new
dans
agenda
le
for
rapport
peace
sur notre
in my
programme
report
commun.
on our common
Nous sommes
agenda.
résolus à tirer le
We are
meilleur,
committed to make the most
le meilleur de
of
tous les
every
outils diplomatiques
diplomatic
de
tool
règlement pacifique
for the
des différends
Pacific
qui s'offrent
settlement
à
of
nous,
disputes
comme le prévoit la
as set
Charte des
out
Nations
in the
Unies.
United Nations
Négociation,
Charter.
enquête, médiation, conciliation,
inquiry,
arbitrage
mediation,
et règlement
conciliation,
judiciaire.
arbitration, and
Excelências,
judicial settlement.
el liderazgo y la
Excellencies,
participación de las mujeres debe
Women's
estar en
leadership
primer
and
plano.
participation
Y también
must be
debemos
front and
priorizar
center,
la
and
prevención
we
y la
must
consolidación de la
also
paz.
prioritize
Eso
prevention
significa
and peace
reforzar
building.
la previsión
That means
estratégica,
strengthening strategic
anticiparse a
foresight,
los focos de violencia que pueden
anticipating
escalar y
flashpoints
hacer
that could erupt
frente
into
a las nuevas
violence,
amenazas
and
que
tackling
suponen la
emerging
ciberguerra
threats
y
posed by
las armas
cyber warfare
autónomas
and
letales.
lethal autonomous
Significa
weapons.
asimismo
It
ampliar el
means
papel de
also
los grupos
expanding
regionales,
the role of regional
reforzar el
groups,
mantenimiento de la
strengthening
paz,
peacekeeping,
intensificar el
intensifying
desarme y la
disarmament
no
and
proliferación,
non-proliferation,
prevenir y combatir
preventing
el
and countering
terrorismo y
terrorism,
garantizar
and
la
ensuring
rendición de
accountability.
cuentas. Y
And
significa
it means
reconocer que los
recognizing
derechos
human
humanos son
rights
piedras de
as
toque
pivotal
de la
for
prevención.
prevention.
Mi
My
llamamiento a la
call
acción en
to
materia de
action on
derechos
human
humanos
rights
destaca la
highlights the
centralidad de los
centrality of
derechos
human
humanos,
rights,
así como
refugee,
la de los
and
refugiados y el
humanitarian
derecho
law.
humanitario. En todo
In
lo que
all we
hacemos,
do,
debemos
we must
reconocer que los
recognize
derechos
that human
humanos son el
rights are the
camino
path
para
to
resolver
resolving
tensiones,
tensions,
poner fin a
ending
los conflictos
conflict,
y
and
forjar una paz
forging
duradera.
lasting peace.
Excellencies, there is another battle we must end, our suicidal war against nature. The climate crisis is the defining issue of our time, and it must be the first priority of every government and multilateral organization. And yet, climate action is being put on the back burner, despite overwhelming public support around the world. Global greenhouse gas emissions need to be slashed by 45% by 2030 to have any hope of reaching net zero emissions by 2050. And yet, emissions are going up at record levels, on course to a 14% increase this decade. we have a rendezvous with climate disaster. I recently saw it with my own eyes in Pakistan, where 1/3 of the country is submerged by a monsoon on steroids. We see it everywhere. Planet Earth is a victim of scorched earth policies. The past year has brought us Europe's worst heat wave since the Middle Ages. Mega drought in China, the United States and beyond. Famine stalking the Horn of Africa. 1 million species at risk of extinction. No region is untouched. And we ain't seen nothing yet. The hottest summers of today may be the coolest summers of tomorrow. Once-in-a-lifetime climate shocks may soon become once-a-year events. And with every climate disaster, we know that women and girls are the most affected. The climate crisis is a case study in moral and economic injustice. The G20 emits 80% of all greenhouse gas emissions. But the poorest and most vulnerable, those who contributed least to this crisis, are bearing its most brutal impacts. Meanwhile, the fossil fuel industry is feasting on hundreds of billions of dollars in subsidies and windfall profits, while households' budgets shrink and our planet burns. Excellencies, let's tell it like it is. Our world is addicted to fossil fuels, and it's time for an intervention. We need to hold fossil fuel companies and their enablers to account. And that includes the banks, private equity, asset managers, and other financial institutions that continue to invest and underwrite carbon pollution. It includes the massive public relations machine raking in billions to shield the fossil fuel industry from scrutiny. Just as they did for the tobacco industry decades before, lobbyists and spin doctors have spewed harmful misinformation. Fossil fuel interests need to spend less time averting a PR disaster and more time averting a planetary one. Of course, fossil fuels cannot be shut down overnight. A just transition means leaving no person or country behind. But it's high time to put fossil fuel producers, investors, and enablers on notice. Polluters must pay. And today I'm calling on all developed economies to tax the windfall profits of fossil fuel companies. Those funds should be redirected in two ways: to countries suffering loss and damage caused by the climate crisis, and to people struggling with rising food and energy prices. As you heard to the COP27 UN Climate Conference in Egypt, I appeal to all leaders to realize the goals of the Paris Agreement. Lift your climate ambition. Listen to your people's calls for change. Invest in solutions that lead to sustainable economic growth. And let me point to three. First, renewable energy. It generates 3 times more jobs. It's already cheaper than fossil fuels, and it's the best way to energy security, stable prices, and new industries. But developing countries need help to make this shift, including through international coalitions to support just energy transitions in key emerging economies. Second, helping countries adapt to worsening climate shocks. Resilience building in developing countries is a smart investment in a reliable supply chains, regional stability, and orderly migration. Last year in Glasgow, developed countries agreed to double adaptation funding by 2025. These must be delivered in full as a starting point. At minimum, adaptation must make up half of all climate finance. And multilateral development banks must step up and deliver. Major economies are their shareholders and must make it happen. Third, addressing loss and damage for disasters. It's high time to move beyond endless discussions. Vulnerable countries need meaningful action. Loss and damage are happening now, hurting people and economies now, and must be addressed now, starting at COP27. This is a fundamental question of climate justice, international solidarity, and trust. And at the same time, we must make sure that every person, community, and nation has access to effective early warning systems within the next 5 years. And we must address the biodiversity crisis by making the December UN Biodiversity Conference a success. The world must agree on a post-2020 global biodiversity framework, one that sets ambitious targets to halt and reverse biodiversity loss, provides adequate financing, and eliminates harmful subsidies that destroy ecosystems on which we all depend. And I also urge you to intensify efforts to finalize an international legally binding agreement to conserve and sustainably use marine biological diversity. We must protect the ocean now and for the future. Excellencies, the climate crisis is coming on top of other heavy weather. A once-in-a-generation global cost of living crisis is unfolding, turbocharged by the war in Ukraine. Some 94 countries, home to 1.6 billion people, many in Africa, face a perfect storm. Economic and social fallout from the pandemic, soaring food and energy prices, crushing debt burdens, spiraling inflation, and the lack of access to finance. These cascading crises are feeding on each other, compounding inequalities, creating devastating hardship, delaying the energy transition, and threatening global financial meltdown. Social unrest is inevitable, with conflict not far behind. And it doesn't have to be this way. A world without extreme poverty, want, or hunger is not an impossible dream. It is within reach. This is the world envisaged by the 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals. But it is not the world we seem to have chosen. Because of our collective decisions, sustainable development everywhere is at risk. The SDGs are issuing an SOS. Even the most fundamental goals on poverty, hunger, and education are going into reverse. More people are poor, more people are hungry, more people are being denied health care and education. Gender equality is going backwards, and women's lives are getting worse, from poverty to choices around sexual and reproductive health to their personal security. Excellencies, developing countries are getting hit from all sides, and we need concerted action. Today, I'm calling for the launch of an SDG stimulus led by the G20 to massively boost sustainable development for developing countries. The upcoming G20 summit in Bali is the place to start. This SDG stimulus has 4 components. First, multilateral development banks, the World Bank and regional counterparts must increase concessional funding to developing countries linked to investments in the Sustainable Development Goals. And the banks themselves need more finance immediately. And then they need to lift their borrowing conditions and increase their appetite for risk so the funds reach all countries in need. Developing countries, particularly small island developing states, face too many obstacles in accessing the finance they need to invest in their people and their future. Second, debt relief. The debt service suspension initiative should be extended and enhanced. But we also need an effective mechanism of debt relief for developing countries, including middle-income countries in debt distress. Creditors should consider debt reduction mechanisms, such as debt climate adaptation swaps. And this could have saved lives and livelihoods in Pakistan, which is drowning not only in floodwater, but in debt. Lending criteria should go beyond gross domestic product and include all the dimensions of vulnerability that affect developing countries. Third, an expansion of liquidity. I urge the International Monetary Fund and major central banks to expand their liquidity facilities and currency lines immediately and significantly. Special drawing rights play an important role in enabling developing countries to invest in recovery and the SDGs. But they were distributed according to existing quotas, benefiting those who need them least. We have been waiting for a reallocation for 19 months, and the amounts we hear about are minimal. A new allocation of special drawing rights must be handled differently, based on justice and solidarity with developing countries. Fourth, I call on governments to empower specialized funds like Gavi, the Global Fund, and the Green Climate Fund. G20 economies should underwrite an expansion of these funds as additional financing for the SDGs. Excellencies, let me be clear. The SDG stimulus I'm proposing is essential, but it is only an interim measure. Today's global financial system was created by rich countries to serve their interests many decades ago. It expands and entrenches inequalities. It requires deep structural reform. And my report on our common agenda proposes a new global deal to rebalance power and resources between developed and developing countries. African countries in particular are underrepresented in global institutions. I hope member states will seize the opportunity to turn these ideas into concrete solutions, including at the Summit of the Future in 2024. Excellencies, the divergence between developed and developing countries, between North and South, between the privileged and the rest, is becoming more dangerous by the day. It is at the root of geopolitical tensions and lack of trust that poison every area of global cooperation, from vaccines to sanctions to trade. But by acting as one, we can nurture fragile shoots of hope. The hope found in climate and peace activists around the world, calling out for change and demanding better of their leaders. The hope found in young people working every day for a better, more peaceful future. The hope found in women and girls leading and fighting for those still being denied their basic human rights. The hope found throughout civil society seeking ways to build more just and equal communities and countries. And the hope found in science and academia racing to stay ahead of deadly diseases and then the COVID-19 pandemic. The hope found in humanitarian heroes rushing to deliver life-saving aid around the world. The United Nations stands with them all. We know lofty ideals must be made real in people's lives, so let's develop common solutions to common problems, grounded in goodwill, trust, and the rights shared by every human being. Let's work as one, a coalition of the world, as United Nations. Thank you.
I thank the Secretary General. The Assembly will now turn to Agenda Item 8, entitled General Debate. Mr. Secretary General, distinguished heads of state and government, excellencies, friends, the world needs solutions through solidarity, sustainability, and science. Solutions because we have drafted many treaties, set excellent goals, yet have taken too little action. We need solidarity because inequalities have reached record heights. We need sustainability because we owe it to our children to leave behind a livable world. We need science because it offers us neutral evidence for our actions. My sincere gratitude goes to all member states, especially to Hungary and the Eastern European Group, for giving me the mandate to turn this motto into reality. Excellencies, we gather today at the most consequential moment of the last 4 decades. des chaleurs extrêmes aux inondations dévastatrices,
Extreme
le changement
flooding,
climatique
extreme heat,
ébranle
climate change
nos communautés.
is
Notre
shared by
consommation
our
et
communities.
nos méthodes de production
Our
lacernent notre
consumption
planète
and our means of
de ses sols
production are tearing
à ses
our
cieux.
planet apart from the earth to
Nous
the
vivons
sky.
dans un état
We
de
are
crise
living in
humanitaire
an
permanent.
ongoing state of humanitarian crisis.
أكثر من 300 مليون شخص في حاجة ماسة للمساعدات الإنسانية
100 million people
والحماية
there urgently need humanitarian
وذلك
assistance and
بزيادة
protection.
قدرها 10% منذ يناير.
And this is an increase of 10%
كما وصلت
since
أزمة
last
الجو
January.
العالمية إلى المستويات
World food
تنذر
crisis
بالخطر بسبب تغيير
has
المناخ
reached an alarming level
ونزاعات وجائحة
because of climate
كوفيد
change,
19.
conflict, and the COVID-19 pandemic.
وفي الأشهر الستة الماضية دفع تضخم أسعار الغذاء والطاقة 70 مليون
The
شخص
food
إلى
and
الأقل
the energy
إلى الفقر.
crisis have pushed at least 70 million people into poverty.
Инфляция тем временем находится
Inflation
на самом
in the
высоком за 40 лет
is at the
уровне.
highest level over the past
Четверть
40 years.
всего населения Земли
1/4 of the entire population
проживает
of
в
the
районах,
planet
охваченных
is
конфликтами,
living in conflict
боевыми
areas,
действиями
in areas where
и
armed
политической
hostilities take place
нестабильностью.
or where there is political instability.
Редко, когда насилие по всему
Violence
миру
has
бывало
rarely
столь
been
жестоким.
as harsh throughout the world before.
Who would have imagined that war would return to Europe? That the nuclear threat would be back in political discourse to settle a dispute with a neighbor? It has been 203 days since the General Assembly adopted a resolution condemning the military aggression against Ukraine. Unfortunately, the bloodshed and the suffering have not stopped yet. In that time, the United Nations, as we heard, and its partners have offered food and shelter to millions of refugees from that country. A landmark agreement on commercial grain exports from the world's best breadbasket offers hope. Diplomacy is at work to release fertilizers so that the shortage we see today do not become the famines of the next year. UN nuclear inspectors are at one of Europe's key nuclear sites, preventing a possible catastrophe. Excellencies, the theme of our 77th General Debate is a watershed moment, transformative solutions to interlocking challenges. I stand in solidarity with the people of Pakistan, where devastating floods washed away hundreds of villages. You have seen the heart-wrenching scenes of devastation. This can be a window into our future. However, in tackling climate change, we have the solutions. These are rooted in the advancement we have made in science cooperation and climate diplomacy. But we have to want to put them in practice. The International Panel on Climate Change has proven an invaluable tool for supporting political decisions to combat climate change and to adapt to its consequences. We should consider replicating its success in the areas of water, energy, food, and biodiversity. This would give us a universally accepted scientific foundation for action. Once this high-level week is over, I plan to launch a series of consultations with the scientific community asking them to help us, bringing the knowledge from microphones, from microscopes to microphones. The 77th session of the General Assembly will be key to preparing the SDG Summit in 2023 and the Summit of the Future in 2024. Next year, we will assess SDG 6 at the UN Water Conference, the first since 1977. This call could not be more urgent. Water is set to be the next major driver of conflict worldwide. The problem of water is threefold: too much, not enough, not safe. We have the chance to make a difference in the lives of 2.1 billion people who lack access to clean water. Let us cooperate to make the Water Action Agenda as transformational, practical, and actionable as possible. During this session, we will also assess the Sendai framework and come to conclusions to improve resilience against disasters. It is vital that these opportunities lead to substantive outcomes. The building blocks for transformation are at our disposal. The 2030 Agenda, the Sendai Framework, the Paris Agreement, the Addis Ababa Programme of Action, and our common agenda all point in the same direction. They describe the world we want and offer the avenues to get there. I'm encouraged that the Secretary General's proposals and the important initiatives by Member States mutually support each other. The challenges are great and they are interconnected, but they are not insurmountable. Ladies and gentlemen, without universal respect to the rule of law, it is all too easy to rapidly slide into treacherous territory. As we all know, in time of crisis, human rights are the first to be compromised. When human rights are under threat, it is our smoke signal, our call to action. It would be remiss to speak of human rights without addressing a fundamental issue found to be lacking in most societies around the world. It is women's right. It is simply unacceptable that every third woman experiences violence in her lifetime. As we speak, half of humanity is all too often excluded from decision-making and leadership. But we need every man and woman to live their lives to their fullest potential. It is only by ensuring the inclusion of all, valuing the knowledge of all, that we will find solutions to the challenges we face. This afternoon's UNGA platform of women leaders, organized in collaboration with UN Women, may be an answer to this goal. Women heads of state and government will offer their solutions to society's complex problems. Data shows that crisis response is more effective when women take the lead. I encourage you to engage substantively with this issue. It has to do with equity and equality, but above all, human dignity. Excellencies, in all these issues, in all our endeavors, I look forward to working closely with the Secretary General, the Security Council, the ECOSOC, and other key relevant institutions of the United Nations. I stand ready to support member states to identify transformative, impact-oriented, systemic, and sustainable solutions. I promise to cooperate with all stakeholders, civil society, young people, women and scientific community, to name but a few. UN agencies, funds and programs are critical to bringing our efforts out of this hole and into our communities. To deliver on the agenda requested by the member states, I count on your constructive engagement, cooperation, and mutual respect to each other. I emphasize that the revitalization of both the United Nations and the General Assembly must continue. Our ability to competently improve our organization will determine its relevance in the eyes of people around the world. I want to advance negotiations on Security Council reform. It is high time that the Council represents the world's population more equally and that it reflects 21st century realities. This is a matter of credibility to our entire organization and our multilateral order. Ladies and gentlemen, crisis management and transformation will require our consistent efforts, way beyond one session of the General Assembly. In that spirit, let me finish with some timeless words of wisdom about chances and the risk of letting them pass us by. Things get better when we make them better. Things go wrong when we fail to seize the opportunities before us. Our opportunity is here and now. Let us act. I thank you. Distinguished delegates, before giving the floor to the first speaker for this morning, I would like to remind members that the list of speakers for the general debate has been established on the agreed basis that statements should be no longer than 15 minutes to enable all speakers to be heard in a given meeting. Within this time frame, I would like to appeal to speakers to deliver their statement at a reasonable pace so that interpretation into the other official United Nations languages may be provided properly. I would also like to draw your attention to the decision taken by the General Assembly at previous sessions, namely that the practice of expressing congratulations inside the General Assembly hall after a speech has been delivered is strongly discouraged. After delivering their statements from the rostrum, speakers are invited to exit the General Assembly hall through room GA200, located behind the podium, before returning to their seats. May I take it that the General Assembly agrees to proceed in this manner during the general debate of the 77th session? It is so decided. Finally, I should like to draw the attention of members that during the general debate, official photographs of all the speakers are taken by the Department of Global Communications. Members interested in obtaining these photographs are requested to contact the Photo Library of the United Nations. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Jair Messias Bolsonaro, President of the Federal Republic of Brazil. I request the protocol to escort His Excellency. On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor to welcome His Excellency Jair Messias Bolsonaro, President of the Federal Republic of Brazil, and to invite him to address the Assembly.
Okay. Hello, that's in the English channel.
Ok?
This is the English channel.
Senhor Chabá Korosi,
This is Shaba Karosi,
presidente da 77ª Assembleia Geral das Nações Unidas. Senhor
General
Antônio
Assembly of the
Guterres,
United Nations. Mr. Antonio
secretário-geral das
Guterres,
Nações Unidas.
Secretary-General of the United Nations.
Senhoras e senhores,
Ladies
chefes de
and
Estado,
gentlemen,
de
heads of
governo
state, heads of
e de
government,
delegações.
and heads of delegation.
Senhoras e senhores,
Ladies and gentlemen at large,
começo por cumprimentá-lo,
I
embaixador
begin
Chabá
by
Korosi,
congratulating
pela
you,
eleição para
Ambassador
presidir
Shaba Karosi,
esta Assembleia
on your
Geral.
election as President
Esteja
of the
certo
General
de
Assembly.
contar com o
You
apoio
can be
do Brasil.
sure that you can
O
certainly
tema
count
escolhido
on
para este
Brazil's
debate geral
support.
gira em
The
torno de
theme chosen for this
conceito
general
que se
debate
aplica
revolves around a
perfeitamente
concept
ao
that
momento que
perfectly
vivemos,
applies to the
um
moment we
divisor
currently
de
live,
águas.
a watershed
Senhor
moment.
presidente,
Mr.
nossa
President,
responsabilidade coletiva
Our collective
nessa Assembleia Geral
responsibility at this
é
general
compreender o
assembly
alcance dos
consists
desafios que
in
compõem
understanding
esse
the
divisor de
actual
águas.
scope
E a partir
of the
daí
challenges that
construir
make up this
respostas que
watershed
tirem
moment.
sua força
And from
dos
there,
objetivos
build
que
the
são
response
comuns a
that
todos nós.
draw their strength
A
from the
tarefa não é
goals that we all
simples,
share.
mas, a rigor,
The task at hand
não
is not a
temos
simple one,
alternativa.
but strictly speaking, we have
Esse
no
esforço
alternative.
tem de começar
The
no
effort
interior de
must
cada dos
begin
nossos
within
países.
each of
Antes
our
de tudo,
countries.
é aquilo que
Domestically.
realizamos no
First of
plano
all,
interno
it is
que dá
what we
a
do at
medida
the
da
domestic level
autoridade
that
com que
gives the
agimos
measure
no plano
of the authority
internacional.
with which we act
Deixe-me
at the
falar da
international level.
perspectiva do meu país.
Therefore, allow me to speak
Quando o
from my
Brasil se
country's
manifesta
perspective.
sobre a agenda
When
da saúde
Brazil
pública,
voices her
fazemos
views
isso com
on
a
the public
autoridade
health
de
agenda,
governo
we
que,
do so with the
durante a
legitimate
pandemia da
authority of a government
Covid-19,
that during
não
the
poupou
COVID-19
esforços
pandemic
para salvar vidas
spared no efforts
e preservar
to save
empregos.
lives and preserve jobs.
Como tantos outros países,
Like so many other
concentramos
countries,
nossa atenção
we
desde a
focused
primeira
our
hora
attention
em
from the very
garantir
outset
auxílio financeiro
on
emergencial
ensuring
aos mais
emergency
necessitados.
financial aid to
O
those
nosso
most
objetivo
in
foi
need.
proteger a renda
Our
das
goal was
famílias
to protect
para que
families'
elas
income
conseguissem enfrentar
so
as
that
dificuldades
they could
econômicas
face up to the economic
decorrentes da
hardships
pandemia.
resulting from the pandemic.
Beneficiamos mais de 68
Therefore, we
milhões de pessoas,
managed to benefit
o
more than
equivalente a 1/3
68
da
million
nossa
people, the
população.
equivalent to 1/3
Em
of the
paralelo,
Brazilian
lançamos
population.
amplo programa
In
de
parallel, we
imunização,
launched a broad-ranging
inclusive com
vaccination
produção
program,
doméstica de
including
vacinas.
domestic production of
Somos uma
vaccines.
nação com
We
210
are a
milhões de
nation
habitantes. E
of
já
more than
temos mais de
210 million
80%
people,
da
and
população
already we have more than
vacinada
80%
contra a
of our
Covid-19.
population fully vaccinated against
Todos foram
COVID-19.
vacinados de forma
All
voluntária,
were vaccinated
respeitando a
voluntarily
liberdade individual
in
de
due
cada
respect of
Da
one's
mesma
individual
forma, no
freedom.
terreno da economia, o Brasil
Likewise,
traz a
in the economic
autoridade de um
arena,
país
Brazil
que,
has the
em
legitimate
nome de
authority of a country
crescimento
that, for
sustentável
the
e
sake
inclusivo,
of sustainable
vem
and
implementando
inclusive
reformas
growth,
para a
has
atração
been
de
putting in place
investimentos
reforms
e
to
melhorias
attract
das
investments
condições de
and
vida de
improve
sua população.
the standards of living of
No meu
her
governo,
population.
extirpamos a
Under my
corrupção
administration,
sistêmica
we
que existia
uprooted
no
the
país.
systemic corruption that
Somente
existed
entre o
in the
período
country.
de 2003
Between
e 2015,
2003
onde a
and
esquerda
2015
presidiu o Brasil,
alone, a
o
period in which the
endividamento
left
da
wing presided
Petrobras
over in
por
Brazil,
má gestão,
indebtedness
loteamento
levels
político
at the oil state
e
company
em
Petrobras
desvios
due to
chegou à casa
mismanagement
dos
and politically driven
170
appointments and
bilhões de
favors, as
dólares.
well as the diversion
O
of
responsável
funds
por isso
reached
foi
up to
condenado em 3
$170
instâncias,
billion.
por
The person
unanimidade.
responsible for that was
Delatores
convicted, unanimously
devolveram
convicted in
1
3
bilhão de
different
dólares
court
e
instances.
pagamos para a Bolsa
Whistleblowers
Americana outro
have
bilhão
returned $1
por
billion
perdas de
and we
seus
paid to
acionistas.
the U.S. stock
Esse é o Brasil
market another
do
$1
passado.
billion due to losses incurred by
Aprimoramos os
shareholders.
serviços
But that
públicos
is the Brazil
com
of the
redução de
past.
custos e
We
investimentos
have
em ciência e tecnologia.
enhanced public services by
Hoje, por
reducing
exemplo,
costs and
o Brasil
investing
é o
in
7º
science and
país
technology.
mais
Today,
digitalizado
for
do
example,
mundo.
Brazil is the
São
world's
135 milhões de
most
pessoas
digitally
que
advanced country.
acessam 4.900
Altogether,
serviços do meu governo.
135 million
O
people
Brasil foi
access
pioneiro na
4,900
implementação do 5G
services
na
provided
América
by my
Latina.
administration. Brazil has been a
Levamos
pioneer
adiante
in 5G
uma abrangente
deployment in
pauta de
Latin America.
privatizações
We
e
have also
concessões,
carried out a comprehensive
com
agenda
ênfase na
of privatization
infraestrutura.
and concession projects.
Concluímos o
with an
projeto de
emphasis on
transposição do Rio São
infrastructure. We have
Francisco,
also completed
levando
the
água
São
para o
Francisco
Nordeste
River
brasileiro.
Transposition Project, therefore bringing water
Adotamos
to the
novos
Brazilian
marcos
northeastern
regulatórios,
region.
como
We
o
have
do
also
saneamento
adopted new
básico, o das
regulatory frameworks,
ferrovias
such
e
as
do
in
gás
basic
natural.
sanitation,
Além
railways,
disso,
and natural
melhoramos
gas.
o ambiente de negócio,
Moreover, we have
com a Lei da
improved the
Liberdade
business
Econômica
environment
e a Lei
with
de
the
startups.
economic freedom law
Como
and the
resultado,
startup
criamos
law.
oportunidades
As
para
a
o
result, we
jovem
now
empreender e
have
ter empregos
created
de
opportunities for
qualidade.
young people to be
Coroando todo
entrepreneurs
esse esforço
and have
de
quality jobs.
modernização da economia brasileira,
Crowning all of
estamos
this
avançando a
effort
passos
to
largos
modernize the Brazilian
para o
economy,
ingresso do
we
Brasil
have
como membro
made
pleno da
great strides
Organização
towards
para a
Brazil's
Cooperação
accession as a full
e
member of the
Desenvolvimento
Organization for
Econômico,
Economic
a
Cooperation
OCDE.
and Development, the
Apesar da
OECD.
crise mundial, o Brasil
Despite
chega ao final de
the
22
global crisis,
com
Brazil
uma
is getting to
economia
the
em
end of
plena
2022
recuperação.
with an
Temos
economy at
emprego em
full
alta e
recovery.
inflação em
We have
baixa.
high
A
employment rates
economia
and
voltou
a
a
low
crescer.
inflation rate.
A
The
pobreza
economy is
aumentou em
back
todo o
on the
mundo
path of
sob o
track,
impacto da
on the path
pandemia.
of growth.
No Brasil, ela já
Poverty
começou
has
a
increased
cair de
across the
forma
world under the
acentuada.
impact of the pandemic.
Os
In
números
Brazil,
falam por si só.
it began to
A
fall
estimativa
sharply.
é de que, no
The
final de
figures speak
22,
for themselves.
4%
It is
das
estimated that by the
famílias
end of
brasileiras
2022,
estejam vivendo
4% of
abaixo
Brazilian
da linha
families
da
will be
pobreza
living
extrema.
below
Em 2019,
the
eram
extreme poverty level.
5,1%.
In 2019,
Isso
it was
representa uma queda de mais de
5.1%.
20%.
This reflects a
O
drop of
Auxílio
more
Brasil,
than
programa de
20%.
renda mínima
The
criado
Brazil
no
Aid
meu
Program,
governo
a minimum
durante a
income
pandemia,
country
que
designed and
atende
established
20
by my
milhões de famílias,
administration during the
faz
pandemic,
pagamentos de quase
currently meets the needs
$4
of
por
20
dia
million
às mesmas.
families and pays out
O
$4
desemprego
a day
caiu
to the
5
poorest
pontos
families in the
percentuais,
country.
chegando a
Employment fell by
9%,
5 percentage
taxa
points,
que não
reaching
se via há 7
9.1%,
anos.
a rate not seen
Reduzimos a
in 7
inflação
years.
com
We
estimativa
have
de 6%
lowered
no
inflation
corrente ano.
with an estimate of less than
Tenho a satisfação
7%
de anunciar
for
que
2022.
tivemos
I am
deflação
pleased to announce
inédita
that we have
no
had
Brasil nos
unprecedented
meses de julho
deflation
e
in
agosto.
Brazil in the months of July
Desde
and
junho,
August
o
this
preço
year.
da gasolina
Since
caiu mais de
June, the
30%.
price of gasoline has
Hoje,
dropped by
litro
more
no
than
Brasil custa
30%.
cerca de
Today, 1
90
liter of
centavos
gasoline
de
in Brazil
dólar.
costs about
O preço da
0.90
energia elétrica
of
também teve uma
$1.
queda de mais de
The price
15%.
of electricity
Quero
has
ressaltar
also
que o
dropped
custo
by
da
more than
energia não caiu por
15%.
causa de
Let me
tabelamento de
emphasize that the cost of
preços
energy
ou
has not
qualquer
dropped because
outro
of
tipo
price
de
fixing
intervenção federal.
or any other type of
Foi resultado
state
de uma política de
intervention. Rather, it was the
racionalização
result
de
of a
impostos
tax
formulada e
rationalization
implementada com
policy
apoio do
designed
Congresso
and
Nacional.
implemented with support
Em
by the
2021,
National
o Brasil
Congress.
foi o quarto maior destino de
In
investimentos
2021, Brazil was the
estrangeiros
fourth largest
direto no
destination
mundo.
country for foreign
Nosso comércio
direct
exterior
investment in the
alcançou a
world.
marca histórica
Our
de
foreign trade
39%
reached
do
the
PIB,
historic milestone
mesmo diminuindo ou
of
zerando
39%
impostos
of the
de
GDP,
milhares de
even after
produtos.
reducing taxes
No plano interno,
or
também
lowering
estamos
taxes down to
batendo
zero
recordes
on
em 3
thousands
áreas.
of products.
Arrecadação
Domestically,
fiscal,
we also
lucro
have record
das
breakers
empresas
in 3 areas:
estatais e
tax
relação entre
collection,
dívida pública e
state-owned
PIB.
company profit
Aliás,
levels,
em
and the
21
public debt
tivemos
to
superávit
GDP
no resultado
ratio. In
consolidado de
fact,
contas
in
públicas.
2021, we had
O
a
PIB
surplus
brasileiro
in the
aumentou
consolidated
1,2%
results or
no
figures
segundo semestre.
for national
A
accounts.
projeção de
Brazilian
crescimento
GDP
para
increased by
22
1.2%
chega a
in the second quarter,
3%.
and the forecast is for up to 3%
Temos a tranquilidade de quem está no bom caminho. O caminho de
We
uma
enjoy the peace
prosperidade
of mind of those who are working in
compartilhada
the right
entre
path,
os
the
brasileiros
path
e,
to
mais
share
além,
prosperity
compartilhada
among
com
Brazilians,
nossos
and beyond
vizinhos
that,
e outros
prosperity
parceiros mundo afora.
shared with our neighbors and other
É
partners
isso que vemos, por
worldwide.
exemplo, na produção de alimentos.
This is precisely
Há
what we
4
see, for
décadas,
example,
o
in
Brasil
food
importava
production.
alimentos.
4 decades
Hoje,
ago, Brazil
somos
used
dos
to be a food
exportadores
importer.
mundiais.
Today, we are
Isso
one of
só
the
foi
world's
possível
largest food
graças
exporters.
a pesados
And this has
investimentos
only been possible
em
thanks to
ciência e inovação,
heavy investments
com
in
vistas à
science and
produtividade
innovation
e à
with a view to boosting
sustentabilidade.
productivity, yield
Faço
levels,
aqui um
and
tributo à pessoa de
sustainability.
Alisson Paulinelli,
May I here pay a
candidato
tribute to Mr.
brasileiro
Alisson
ao Prêmio Nobel
Paulinelli,
da Paz,
the Brazilian
por
candidate
seu
for the
papel na
Nobel
expansão
Peace
da fronteira
Prize,
agrícola
for his
brasileira
role in
com o uso de
expanding the
novas
Brazilian agricultural
tecnologias.
frontier with the use of
Este
new
ano, o Brasil já
technologies.
começou a colheita
This
da
year,
maior
Brazil
safra
has
de
already
grãos da
started the
nossa história.
harvest, or the largest
Estima-se
grain
pelo menos
harvest in our history.
270
We
milhões de
estimate it
toneladas.
to be at
O
least
Brasil também, em
270
poucos anos,
million
passará de
tons. In
importador
a few
a
years, Brazil
exportador de
will will
trigo.
also make the transition
Para
from
o
net
período
import of
de
wheat
22
to a net
23,
export of
a
wheat.
previsão é que
For the
a produção total
2022-2023 period,
ultrapasse
the
os
forecast is
300
that our
milhões de
total
toneladas.
production will exceed exceed
Como
300
afirmou a
million
diretora-geral
tons.
da Organização Mundial
As
do Comércio,
stated by
em recente
Director General
visita
of
aqui
the
no
World
CES.
Trade
Se
Organization
não fosse
in
o
a recent
agronegócio
visit to
brasileiro,
Brazil,
o
she
planeta
stated that if
passaria
it were
fome.
not for
Pois
Brazilian agribusiness,
alimentamos
the
mais de
planet would go
bilhão de
hungry,
pessoas
since we
ao
feed
redor do
more
mundo.
than 1 billion people worldwide.
O nosso agronegócio é
Our
orgulho nacional.
agribusiness is a source of national
Senhor
pride.
Presidente,
Mr.
quero lembrar
President,
que
I also wish to
também
call
na
to
área
mind
do
here that
desenvolvimento
also in the
sustentável,
field of
o
sustainable
patrimônio
development,
de realizações do Brasil
Brazil's track
é fonte de
record of
credibilidade
achievements
para a
is a
ação
source of
internacional do
credibility
nosso país.
for our country's
Em
international
matéria de meio
action.
ambiente e
As regards the
desenvolvimento
environment
sustentável,
and sustainable
o Brasil é
development,
parte da
Brazil
solução
is
e
part of
referência
the
para o
solution
mundo.
and stands as a
2/3
reference
de
to the
todo o
world.
território brasileiro
2/3
permanece
of all of the
com
Brazilian
vegetação
territory
nativa,
remain
que se
untouched,
encontra
covered by native
exatamente como
vegetation,
estava
precisely
quando o Brasil
as
foi
it were
descoberto
when Brazil
em
was first
1500.
discovered in the 1500s.
Na Amazônia brasileira,
In the Brazilian Amazon
área
region,
equivalente à Europa
an area
Ocidental,
as big as
mais de
Western Europe,
80% da
more
floresta
than
continua intocada,
80%
ao contrário
of
do
the
que é
rainforest
divulgado
remains
pela grande
untouched
mídia
and pristine,
nacional e internacional.
contrary to what is often reported
É
by the mainstream
fundamental
national
que,
and
ao
international
cuidarmos do meio
media,
ambiente,
it is
não
absolutely key
esqueçamos
in the
das
sense
pessoas.
that when taking
A
care of the
região
environment,
amazônica
we do
abriga
not
mais de
overlook
20
people.
milhões
The
de
Amazon
habitantes,
region is home to more
entre
than
eles
20 million people,
indígenas e
including
ribeirinhos,
indigenous people and
cuja
riverside
subsistência
dwellers,
depende de
whose
algum aproveitamento
livelihood depends on
econômico da floresta.
some form of economic
Levamos
use
internet
of the
a mais de
forest.
11 mil escolas
We have
rurais
made, or we
e a
have brought
mais de
internet
500
connectivity to more than
comunidades indígenas.
100,000 rural
O Brasil
schools and more
começou
than 500
sua transição
indigenous
energética há
communities.
quase meio século,
Brazil began its
em
energy
reação às
transition almost
crises
half a
do
century ago
petróleo daquela
in
época.
response to the oil crisis
Hoje temos
of
uma
that
indústria de
time.
biocombustíveis
Today, we
moderna
have a
e
modern
sustentável.
and sustainable biofuel
Indústria
industry,
que contribui
an industry that
para a
currently
matriz
contributes,
energética mais
positively
limpa
contributes
entre
to
os países do
the
G20.
cleanest energy
Cerca de
mix among G20
84% da
countries.
nossa matriz
About
elétrica
84% of our
atualmente é
electricity
renovável.
or energy mix is currently
E esse é
renewable,
o objetivo
and
que muitos
this
países
is a goal
desenvolvidos
that many
esperam
developed
alcançar
countries
somente
hope
depois de
to
2040
achieve only
ou
after
2050.
2040 or
No ano
2050.
passado, o Brasil foi escolhido
Last year, Brazil
pelas
was
Nações Unidas
chosen
como
or
país campeão da
declared by the
transição
United Nations
energética.
as
Temos
a
capacidade
global
para ser
transition for
grande
energy
exportador
transition.
mundial de energia limpa.
Have the potential to become a
Contamos com
major global
excedente já em
exporter of clean
construção,
energy.
que pode
We
chegar
have a
a mais de
surplus
100
already being built
gigawatts
up,
entre
which can
biomassa,
reach more
eólica,
than 100
terrestre e
gigawatts
solar,
between
além
biomass,
da
onshore wind
oportunidade
projects and
ainda
solar
não
projects, in
explorada de
addition to the
eólicas marítimas
untapped
de
opportunity
700 gigawatts,
of 700
com
gigawatt
dos
offshore wind
menores custos de
farms,
produção do mundo.
with one of the
Essas fontes
lowest
produzirão
production costs
hidrogênio verde
in the
para
world.
exportação.
These sources will
Parte
produce
dessa
green
energia
hydrogen
100%
for
limpa
export.
abre a
Part of this
possibilidade de sermos
100%
fornecedores de
clean energy
produtos industriais
opens the possibility for us to
altamente
become suppliers
competitivos,
of highly competitive
especialmente no
industrial
Nordeste
projects,
brasileiro,
especially in the
com uma
Brazilian
das menores
Northeast,
pegadas de carbono do
with
mundo.
one of the
A
smallest
agenda do
carbon
desenvolvimento
footprints in the
sustentável
world.
é afetada de várias maneiras.
The
pelas
Sustainable
ameaças à
Development
paz e
Agenda
à
is
segurança
impacted in many
internacional.
ways by threats to international
Erguemos
peace
as
and
Nações Unidas
security.
em meio aos
We all
escombros da
built the
Segunda
United
Guerra Mundial.
Nations from the ruins of the
nos
Second World
motivava
War in the
naquele
last century.
momento
What
era a
motivated us back
determinação de
then
evitar
was
que se
the
repetisse
determination to
o
avoid a
ciclo de
repetition
destruição
of
que marcou a
the
primeira
cycle of
metade do
destruction
século
that
XX.
marked the first half
Até
of the
certo
20th
ponto,
century.
podemos dizer
To a
que
certain
fomos
extent, in
bem-sucedidos.
hindsight, we
Mas
can say
hoje,
that we were
o
successful.
conflito na Ucrânia
But
serve de
today,
alerta.
the conflict
Uma
in
reforma
Ukraine
da ONU é
serves as a
essencial para
warning.
encontrarmos
A
a paz
reform
mundial.
of the UN system is
No caso específico
essential
do Conselho de
for us to
Segurança,
find world
após
peace.
25
In
anos
the
de
specific
debate,
case of the
está claro
Security
que
Council,
precisamos
after
buscar
25
soluções
years of debate,
inovadoras.
it is clear
O
that we
Brasil
must
fala desse
look
assunto com
for
base em
innovative
uma
solutions.
experiência que
Brazil
remonta aos
addresses this
primórdios da
topic
ONU.
based on an experience
É
that
pela
goes way back
11ª
and dates back
vez
to the very
que
beginnings of
ocupamos
the United
assento
Nations.
não permanente
It is now
no
the
Conselho.
11th time that we
Temos
hold
buscado
a
dar o melhor de
non-permanent
nós
seat at
para a
the
solução
UN Security
pacífica
Council.
e negociada
We
dos
have sought
conflitos internacionais.
to offer our very best
Sempre
to
guiados
achieve peaceful
pela
and
Carta da
negotiated
ONU
solutions
e
to
pelo
international
direito
conflicts,
internacional.
always guided by
O
the
Brasil
UN
também
Charter
tem
and
longo
international
histórico
law.
de participação em missões de
Brazil
paz
also
da ONU.
has an extensive history
Do
of
Suez a Angola,
participation in
do
UN
Haiti ao
peacekeeping
Líbano.
operations. From
Sempre
Suez
tivemos
to
ao
Angola,
lado da
from Haiti
manutenção
to
da paz.
Lebanon, we have always
Também contribuímos para a paz
supported
ao abrirmos nossas
peacekeeping.
fronteiras fronteiras
We have also
para aqueles
contributed to
que buscam uma
peace
chance
by
de
opening up our
reconstruir suas
borders to
vidas
those
em
seeking a
nosso
chance
país.
to restart their
Desde
lives
2018,
in our country.
mais de 100
Since
milhões,
2018,
mais de 6 milhões
over
de irmãos
6 million
venezuelanos
Venezuelan
foram obrigados
brothers
a deixar seu país.
have been forced to
Muitos deles
leave
vieram
their
para o
country.
Brasil.
Many of them came
Nossa
to Brazil.
resposta a esse desafio
Our
foi a
response
Operação Acolhida,
to this
que se
challenge was
tornou
Operation
referência
Welcome,
internacional.
which has become an
Já
international
são mais de
benchmark reference.
350 mil
More
venezuelanos
than
que encontraram em território
350,000
brasileiro
Venezuelan nationals have
assistência
found in
emergencial,
Brazilian territory
proteção,
emergency assistance,
documentação
protection,
e a possibilidade de
documentation,
recomeço.
and the possibility of a fresh
Todos têm
start.
acesso ao mercado de
All of them
trabalho,
have had
a
access to the
serviços
labor market,
públicos
to
e a
public
benefícios
services
sociais.
and to social benefits.
Nos últimos
In
meses,
recent
chegam
months,
por dia ao Brasil até
around
cerca de
600
600
venezuelans
venezuelanos,
have
a
arrived
grande
in Brazil
maioria
every day on
dos
foot,
quais
the vast majority
mulheres
of
e
which
crianças,
are women and
pesando em
children
média 15
weighing
quilos a menos
on
do que
average
tinham antes,
15
fugindo da
kilos
violência
less
e
than
da fome.
before, and running away from violence
A
and
política
hunger.
brasileira de acolhimento
The
humanitário vai além
Brazilian
da
humanitarian
Venezuela.
reception
Temos
policy
também
goes
recebido
beyond
haitianos,
Venezuela. We
sírios,
have also
afegãos
welcomed
e ucranianos.
Haitians, Syrians,
Senhor
Afghans,
presidente,
and
o
Ukrainians.
conflito na
Mr.
Ucrânia
President,
já se estende por
The
7
conflict
meses
in Ukraine
e
has been
gera
going on
apreensão
for
não
7
apenas
months
na
already,
Europa,
and it
mas
is
em
a
todo o
source of
mundo.
great concern,
Quero, em
not
primeiro
only
lugar,
Europe, but throughout the
renovar o
world.
agradecimento do Brasil aos
First of all, I
países que
would like to
ajudaram
reiterate
na evacuação de
Brazil's
brasileiros
gratitude to the
que se
countries that
encontravam
helped
na Ucrânia
with the
quando
evacuation of
começou o
Brazilian
conflito.
nationals who were in Ukraine when
Refiro-me
the
especialmente
conflict
à
first
Eslováquia,
started,
Hungria,
especially
Polônia,
Slovakia,
Romênia
Hungary,
e
Poland,
República
Romania,
Tcheca.
and the Czech Republic.
A
Thank you very
operação
much.
foi exitosa.
The evacuation
Não
operation was
deixamos ninguém para
successful.
trás,
We left
nem
no one
mesmo seus
behind,
animais
not
de
even their
estimação.
pets.
Diante do conflito em si,
Regarding the
o
conflict
Brasil
in itself,
tem se pautado
Brazil
pelos
has
princípios do direito
been
internacional
guided
e da
by
Carta da ONU.
the principles of
Princípios que
international
estão
law and the
consagrados
UN
também em
Charter,
nossa
principles that
Constituição.
are also enshrined in
Defendemos
our national
cessar-fogo
constitution.
imediato,
We advocate
a
an
proteção de
immediate
civis e
ceasefire,
não
the
combatentes,
protection of
a
civilians and
preservação da
non-combatants,
infraestrutura
the
crítica
preservation of
para
critical
assistência à
infrastructure
população
to
e a
assist
manutenção
the
de todos
population
os canais de
and the
diálogo entre
maintenance
as
of
partes
all
em
channels of
conflito.
dialogue between the parties at
Esses são os
conflict.
primeiros passos para alcançarmos uma
These are the
solução
first
que
steps
seja
towards
duradoura
achieving a
e
solution that will be
sustentável.
long-lasting
Temos
and
trabalhado
sustainable.
nessa direção.
And we have
Nas
been working
Nações
in that
Unidas e em
direction.
outros fóruns,
At the United
temos
Nations and
tentado
also
evitar o
elsewhere,
bloqueio dos canais de
we
diálogo,
have tried to avoid
causado pela
hampering
polarização em
the
torno do
channels of
conflito.
dialogue as a result of
É nesse
polarization
sentido que somos
around the
contra o
conflict.
isolamento diplomático
Accordingly,
e
we
econômico.
are against
As
diplomatic and
consequências do
economic
conflito já se faz
isolation.
sentir nos
The
preços mundiais de
effects of
alimentos,
the conflict
de
can already be
combustíveis
felt in
e
the
de outros
world
insumos.
prices of
Esses
foodstuffs,
impactos nos colocam
fuel,
a
and
todos
other
na
raw
contramão
materials.
dos
All of
objetivos
this impact
do
drives
desenvolvimento
us all
sustentável.
away from the
Países
sustainable
que se
development
apresentavam como
goals.
líderes da economia
Countries
de
that
baixo
once
carbono
presented themselves as
agora passaram a
leaders of the
usar
low carbon
fontes
economy
sujas de energia.
have now turned to
Isso
dirty sources
configura
of energy.
grave
This
retrocesso
is a
para o meio
serious
ambiente.
setback for the environment.
Apoiamos todos os
We
esforços para
support
reduzir
all
os
efforts to
impactos
reduce the economic
econômicos dessa
impacts
crise.
of this crisis.
Mas não
But
acreditamos
we
que
do
o
not
melhor caminho
believe that the
seja
best
a
way
adoção de
is to
sanções
adopt
unilaterais
one-sided
e
or
seletivas,
unilateral and
contrárias
selective
ao direito
sanctions
internacional.
that are
Essas
inconsistent with
medidas
international
têm
law.
prejudicado a
These
retomada
measures
da economia
have
e
harmed
afetado os direitos humanos de
economic
populações
recovery and have
vulneráveis,
threatened the
inclusive
human
em
rights of
países da
vulnerable
própria
populations,
Europa.
including in
A solução
European
para o conflito
countries.
da Ucrânia
The
será
solution to the
alcançada
conflict in Ukraine
somente
will
pela
only be
negociação e
achieved
pelo diálogo.
through negotiation
Faça
and
um apelo às
dialogue.
partes, bem como
I
a
make
toda
an
a
appeal to the
comunidade
parties as well
internacional.
as to
Não deixe
the
escapar
entire
nenhuma
international community.
oportunidade
Let
por
us not miss
fim
any
ao
opportunity to
conflito de
end the
garantir a
conflict
paz.
and ensure peace.
A estabilidade, a
The
segurança e a
stability,
prosperidade
security,
da
and
humanidade
prosperity of
correm sério
humankind
risco se o
are at
conflito
serious
continuar.
risk if the conflict
Senhor
continues.
Presidente, tenho sido
Mr.
defensor
President,
incondicional
I
da
have been
liberdade de expressão.
an
Além
unconditional
disso, no meu
supporter
governo, o
of
Brasil
freedom
tem
of
trabalhado
speech.
para trazer o
Moreover,
direito
under
à
my
liberdade de
administration,
religião
Brazil has made
para
an
o
effort to
centro da
bring the
agenda
right of
internacional
freedom
dos
of
direitos
religion
humanos.
to the very
É
core
essencial
of the
garantir
international
que
human
todos
rights
têm o
agenda.
direito de
It is
professar e
essential to
praticar
ensure that
livremente
everyone has the right to
sua
freely
orientação religiosa,
worship and practice
sem
their religious
discriminação.
orientation without any
Quero
discrimination
aqui
whatsoever.
anunciar que o Brasil abre
I
suas
would like to
portas
inform here
para
that Brazil
acolher
is
os
ready,
padres e
stands ready
freiras
to welcome the
católicos
Catholic priests
que têm
and
sofrido
nuns
perseguição
who
do
have
regime
suffered
ditatorial
prosecution,
da
rather,
Nicarágua.
have suffered
O
persecution
Brasil
by
repudia a
the
perseguição
dictatorial
religiosa
regime
em
in
qualquer lugar
Nicaragua.
do mundo.
Brazil repudiates religious
Outros
persecution
valores
wherever it may
fundamentais
occur in the
para a
world.
sociedade brasileira, com reflexo na
Other
pauta
fundamental
dos direitos
values for
humanos,
Brazilian
são a
society with
defesa da
implications
família,
to the human
do
rights
direito à
agenda
vida
include
desde a
the defense
concepção
of family values, the right to life, sense, conception, the right to self-defense, and the repudiation of gender ideology. I would also like to underscore the priority we have attached to women's rights and protection. Our efforts to sanction over 70 legal norms on the subject since the very beginning of my administration in 2019 is thorough evidence of this commitment. We fight violence against women very strictly. It is part and parcel of our broader priority to ensure public security and safety for all Brazilians. The results are visible in our government figures. A 7.7% drop in the number of murders of women and a decrease in the general number of deaths by murder. In 2017, there were 30 deaths per 100,000 inhabitants. Now there are only 17. Violence in rural areas has also plummeted at the same time as land tenure by the most in need has increased. Under my administration, we have delivered 400,000 rural property land title deeds, 80% of which given to women. In Brazil, we work to ensure that we have strong, independent women so that they can get wherever they wish. First Lady Michelle Bolsonaro has
desde 2019, com especial atenção
a new meaning to volunteer work since 2019, with special attention to people with disabilities and rare diseases. Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General, Heads of State and Government, ladies and gentlemen, last September 7th, Brazil celebrated 200 years of history as an independent nation. Millions of Brazilians took to the streets, called upon by their government, and wearing the colors of their flag, our flag. It was the largest civic demonstration in the history of our country, a people that believes in God, the homeland, family, and freedom. Thank you all very much.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Federal Republic of Brazil for the statement just made, and I request the protocol to escort His Excellency. The Assembly will hear the address by His Excellency Macky Sall, President of the Republic of Senegal. I request the protocol to escort His Excellency. On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor to welcome His Excellency Macky Sall, President of the Republic of Senegal, and invite him to address the Assembly.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
Monsieur le Président de l'Assemblée
Mr.
générale,
President of the General Assembly,
chers collègues,
dear colleagues,
Monsieur le Secrétaire général,
Secretary
Mesdames,
General,
Messieurs,
ladies and gentlemen,
distingués délégués,
distinguished delegates,
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. President,
au nom de
on
l'Union
behalf
africaine,
of the African Union,
je remercie votre
I would
prédécesseur
like to express my thanks
et
to
vous
your
adresse
predecessor
tous nos vœux de succès
and wish you every
à la
success
présidence de
in
notre
the
session.
discharge of your duties.
Je renouvelle au Secrétaire général
I
Antonio
reiterate our
Guterres
support to the Secretary
notre
General,
soutien
Antonio Guterres,
dans l'exercice
as he
de sa
carries
délicate
out
mission
his delicate
au
mission
service des États
in the
membres.
service of member states.
Depuis notre dernière session,
Since our last session,
le monde est
the
devenu plus
world has
dangereux
become more
et
dangerous
plus incertain
and more uncertain
sous l'emprise
under
combinée
the combined
du
grip
réchauffement climatique,
of global warming,
des périls sécuritaires
security
et
and
sanitaires,
health perils,
ainsi que de la guerre en
and
Ukraine.
the war in Ukraine.
Le thème de cette
The
session
theme
montre
of
à
this
quel point
session
il urge d'agir
reflects the
ensemble
urgent need to
pour
act together
apaiser
to
les
ease
tensions,
tensions,
soigner notre
to
planète,
heal our planet,
réduire les urge d'agir ensemble pour apaiser les tensions, soigner notre planète, réduire les inégalités persistantes nord-sud et redonner sens au multilatéralisme. Le Conseil de sécurité est interpellé au premier chef afin qu'il traite de la même manière toutes les menaces à la paix et à la sécurité internationale, y compris en Afrique. Le terrorisme qui gagne du terrain sur le continent n'est pas qu'une affaire africaine. C'est une menace globale qui relève de la responsabilité première du Conseil, garant du mécanisme de sécurité collective en vertu de la charte de l'organisation. Ainsi, invitons-nous le Conseil à mieux s'engager avec nous dans la lutte contre le terrorisme en Afrique, avec des mandats plus adaptés et des moyens plus conséquents. En outre, l'Union africaine appelle une fois de plus à la levée des sanctions étrangères contre le Zimbabwe. Ces mesures sévères continuent de nourrir un sentiment d'injustice contre tout un peuple et d'aggraver ses souffrances en ces temps de crise profonde. Au Proche-Orient, nous réitérons le droit du peuple palestinien à un État viable, coexistant pacifiquement avec l'État d'Israël, chacun à l'intérieur de frontières sûres et internationalement reconnues. Nous appelons à la désescalade et à la cessation des hostilités en Ukraine pour une solution négociée afin d'éviter le risque catastrophique d'un conflit potentiellement mondial. La négociation et la discussion sont les meilleures armes dont nous disposons pour promouvoir la paix. Je lance un appel pour la mise en place d'une mission de médiation de haut niveau à laquelle l'Union africaine est prête à apporter sa contribution. Près de 80 ans après la naissance du système des Nations Unies et des institutions de Bretton Woods, il est temps d'instaurer une gouvernance mondiale plus juste, plus inclusive et plus adaptée aux réalités de notre temps. Il est temps de vaincre les réticences et de construire les narratifs qui persistent à confiner l'Afrique à la marge des cercles décisionnels. Il est temps de faire droit à la juste et légitime revendication africaine sur la réforme du Conseil de sécurité telle que reflétée dans le consensus d'Evénement. Dans le même esprit, je rappelle notre demande d'octroi d'un siège à l'Union africaine au sein du G20 pour que l'Afrique puisse enfin se faire représenter là où se prennent les décisions qui engagent 1,4 milliard d'Africains. Je remercie chaleureusement les partenaires qui nous ont déjà exprimé leur soutien et invite les autres à considérer favorablement notre candidature. Au titre de la gouvernance économique et financière, j'attire l'attention de l'Assemblée générale sur le rapport 2022 sur le financement du développement durable, réalisé par une soixantaine d'institutions multilatérales dont le Fonds monétaire international, la Banque mondiale, le Comité de Bâle sur la supervision bancaire, l'Association internationale des régulateurs de l'assurance et le Conseil de stabilité financière. Ce rapport relève les insuffisances dans les procédés d'évaluation des agences de notation et souligne l'importance d'appliquer des méthodologies transparentes afin de ne pas miner la confiance dans les notations. Nous sommes préoccupés par le fait que la perception du risque en Afrique continue d'être plus élevée que le risque réel, ce qui renchérit les primes d'assurance et pénalise la compétitivité de nos économies. C'est pourquoi l'Afrique renouvelle sa proposition au groupe de réponse à la crise mondiale sur l'alimentation, l'énergie et les finances, afin qu'il engage, en rapport avec le G20, le FMI et la Banque mondiale, un dialogue constructif avec les agences de notation sur l'amélioration de leurs méthodes de travail et d'évaluation. Dans le même esprit, face à l'ampleur inédite de la crise économique mondiale, l'Union africaine réitère son appel pour la réallocation partielle des droits de tirage spéciaux, si nécessaire pour les pays en développement dans un premier temps, et la mise en œuvre de l'initiative du G20 de suspension du service de la dette. Ce choc, mesdames et messieurs, sans précédent, fragilise davantage les économies les plus faibles et rend encore plus pressant leurs besoins en liquidité pour atténuer les effets de l'inflation généralisée et soutenir les ménages et les couches sociales les plus vulnérables, notamment les jeunes et les femmes. S'y ajoute la prise en charge des urgences sanitaires nouvelles ou anciennes, dont le cancer, un tueur silencieux qui continue de faire des millions de victimes à travers le monde. J'appelle à la mobilisation en faveur de la campagne Rays of Hope de l'Agence internationale de l'énergie atomique pour le renforcement des capacités des pays membres, africains en particulier, dans la lutte contre le cancer grâce aux technologies nucléaires telles que l'imagerie médicale, la médecine nucléaire et la radiothérapie. Monsieur le Président, Mesdames et Messieurs, à quelques semaines de la COP27 de Sharm el-Sheikh en Égypte, l'Afrique renouvelle son attachement à l'accord de Paris sur le climat. En même temps, nous souhaitons parvenir à un consensus pour une transition énergétique juste et équitable, comme ce fut le cas au sommet Afrique-Europe de février dernier, à la session élargie du sommet du G7 en juin et récemment au forum de Rotterdam sur le financement de l'adaptation en Afrique. Il est légitime et juste et équitable que l'Afrique, continent le plus en retard sur le processus d'industrialisation, continent le moins pollueur, il est donc juste que l'Afrique exploite ses ressources disponibles pour disposer d'une énergie de base afin d'améliorer la compétitivité de son économie et réaliser l'accès universel à l'électricité. Je rappelle qu'à ce jour, plus de 600 millions d'Africains vivent encore sans électricité. Travaillons également à la réalisation de l'objectif de 100 milliards de dollars par an en appui aux efforts d'adaptation des pays en développement et au financement du programme d'accélération de l'adaptation en Afrique sous l'égide de la Banque africaine de développement et du Centre mondial pour l'adaptation. Au demeurant, nous considérons le financement de l'adaptation non comme de l'aide, mais comme une contribution des pays industrialisés à un partenariat mondial solidaire en contrepartie des efforts que fournissent les pays en développement pour éviter les schémas pollueurs qui ont plongé la planète dans l'état d'urgence climatique actuel. Monsieur le Président, au-delà des urgences conjoncturelles, je suis venu porter le message d'un continent déterminé à travailler avec tous ses partenaires dans une éthique relationnelle de dialogue confiant et de respect réciproque. Je suis venu dire que l'Afrique a assez subi le fardeau de l'histoire, qu'elle ne veut pas être le foyer d'une nouvelle guerre froide, mais plutôt un pôle de stabilité et d'opportunité ouvert à tous ses partenaires, sur une base mutuellement bénéfique. Je suis venu dire que nous n'ignorons pas l'Afrique des problèmes, qu'il faut pacifier et stabiliser. Mais je suis également venu dire que nous avons aussi l'Afrique des solutions, avec ses 30 millions de kilomètres carrés, ses ressources humaines, plus de 60% des terres arables du monde, ses richesses minières, forestières, hydriques et énergétiques. Oui, l'Afrique, oui, nous avons l'Afrique des solutions, avec des gouvernements à la tâche, au quotidien, une jeunesse vibrante qui innove, entreprend et réussit, des millions d'hommes et de femmes qui travaillent dur pour nourrir, éduquer et soigner leurs familles, qui investissent, créent de la richesse et génèrent des emplois. Cette Afrique des solutions souhaite engager avec tous ses partenaires des rapports réinventés qui transcendent le préjugé selon lequel qui n'est pas avec moi est contre moi. Nous voulons un multilatéralisme ouvert et respectueux de nos différences, parce que le système des Nations Unies, né sur les cendres de la guerre, ne peut emporter l'adhésion de tous que sur la base d'idéaux partagés et non de valeurs locales érigées en normes universelles. C'est en collaborant dans le respect de nos différences que nous redonnerons force et vitalité à la raison d'être des Nations Unies, c'est-à-dire préserver les générations actuelles et futures du fléau de la guerre, promouvoir la cohabitation pacifique des peuples et favoriser le progrès en instaurant de meilleures conditions de vie pour tous. Je souhaite plein succès aux travaux de la 77e session de l'Assemblée générale. Je vous remercie de votre aimable attention.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of Senegal for the statement just made, and I request the protocol to escort His Excellency. And the Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Gabriel Boric Font, President of the Republic of Chile. I request the protocol to escort His Excellency. On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor to welcome His Excellency Gabriel Boric Font, President of the Republic of Chile, and to invite him to address the Assembly.